through time, I think one of the things that we've realized is with more program accountability and demands on proving what we're doing is working in terms of practice, that we've had to really look at evaluations. And I think the roadmap that we've been working on with this work group really helps us to identify what we didn't know, many of us in our experiences, is to identify key evaluation questions. So it's really helping us to better focus our energy and what we're looking for as we, in our responsibility to hire evaluators that are more culturally sensitive to the work we do. And I think the other challenge for many of us has been how do we oversee that work in terms of the process. And most critically is taking the data that we are collecting from our evaluations work is how do we put that into meaningful decision making as we develop our programs and make policies that really work for the tribes.
The role of evaluation partners in early childhood evaluation, tribal child welfare evaluation, is really to help communities, really to guide the evaluation process, to help set up how the evaluation should be done, identify the important questions to be asked, and bring the tools to be able to do that and to get that valid and reliable information that can answer important questions. Who those evaluation partners are varies across contexts, but most of the time they tend to be people from outside the community that come in as consultants to work on particular evaluation projects. A lot of times those are private consultants, sometimes they're university partners. More often than not, they are outsiders to the community. Sometimes they are native evaluation partners, but they may be not native to the particular community in which the evaluation is being done.
A tribal evaluator would be directly involved in the process of evaluating child welfare programs in a tribal community. More importantly, they would work with the communities to design and implement an evaluation plan. Other times, they would work collaboratively with other evaluators to coordinate an evaluation plan. So it's an evolution of what would be best for a particular tribal community as they decide what questions that they have and what resources that they have and how they want to better understand what those practices are within their community.
I think another role that evaluators can have is helping to interpret some of the guidelines for evaluation that are coming from funders, some of the requirements of funding streams, and working with people in programs to understand what those requirements are and how they make sense in the community and how local community questions can be answered in the context of meeting those needs, and also sharing the local perspectives back with the funders to help shape what those requirements are.
I think the other piece that we need to remember as program directors with the tribes is to acknowledge how critical it is to have our tribal governments involved, tribal leadership which includes our tribal councils, our tribal presidents, and other tribal officials who work within the community, and also most importantly is our tribal elders who have a lot of history with the community. They need to acknowledge their influence that they have on who we bring in to do the tribal evaluations, and what we do with the findings and how we apply that to policy development and how we work to develop our programs. And also I would hope that we can encourage and promote within our tribal leadership the importance of hiring experts in the field and develop our own infrastructure of tribal evaluation workforce. And I think that'll really empower us to use our local resources and address our local concerns and makes all of this evaluation work really meaningful.
I think the most important thing is that all evaluations should begin with conversations with the community, with really intensive conversations, talking with folks in the community about what the priorities are for research that's going to be done or for evaluation that's going to be done, and working with them to develop what questions are important to be answered locally. So in particular, what do they want to know about the programs that they're implementing and the questions they have about how those can be improved. And then also in those conversations to talk with local community folks about what are the appropriate strategies for collecting information in those communities, what designs research designs, evaluation designs would be appropriate, and what are the best ways to share findings back with the community, to return what's learned back with the community. There's a long history of research and evaluation in tribal communities that has been very harmful, very destructive, because outside programs have come in, have done evaluations, and too often have deemed tribal communities to be lacking in different ways. And a lot of times the reason for that tribal communities look like they're lacking is because the methods used have not been tailored to the needs of the community. So there's a lot of distrust that's been developed. There's a lot of fear of evaluation, and I think it's really important, which I think goes back to the conversations as the start, is to be having conversations with people in the communities about what are the local priorities, what are the local needs, what are the local ways of doing things, to make sure that the evaluation that is done is not only scientifically but also culturally rigorous, that it really is respectful of the cultural ways. So one example of this was just from some conversations I had in a community just this past week, where we were looking at measures of early child development. And the measures have milestones that children are sort of judged against. If they've reached certain milestones at a certain age, then we deem that child on path as developing appropriately. If they're not reaching those milestones, then the child is seen as having a developmental problem. And one of the items that we looked at on this particular measure was that a child at 12 months of age can walk upstairs with help. And in the community that we were having conversations about this, people said, we don't have stairs in our community. So a child would fail on that item, that they wouldn't be able to walk upstairs with help by 12 months of age, and they might look developmentally delayed, when in fact the child could be doing all kinds of things that reflect that same level of motor development, but because the measure is not appropriate to the community context, it's not getting valid information. In other words, we wouldn't have a real good idea of how a child is developing if we're using measures that are not appropriate to that context. Part of reclaiming the value of those terms, rigorous evaluation, is that it's not rigorous if it uses methods that don't fit the community. So we're not getting good, sound, valid information if we just use cookie-cutter approaches to evaluation. We really need to think about what the meaning is in the cultural context, and whether or not the information that's being collected really does reflect what's happening.
There are a number of things that tribal evaluators can do. They can assist with the consolidation and coordination of data across the many different kind of programs that are collecting data in a variety of ways. I think that's probably one of the initial efforts that any tribal evaluator should be aware of, and should think seriously about how they can coordinate this, because of typically we have several different kinds of evaluators for our different programs. And most tribal communities are collecting data for child welfare programs and the various programs, because most of them are federally or state funded. We want to not have duplication of efforts, because in many, many cases there is that duplication of efforts. What we would like is data collected from one program could be combined with data from other programs to provide a more comprehensive picture of what the community service needs are, as well as the service delivery. Tribal evaluators can assist in determining data sources and identifying how data sharing might reduce the burden to our tribal communities, especially those communities with really limited resources.
I think universities have a really important role in developing the research evaluation workforce within tribal communities. One of the things that we talked about a lot in the roadmap, in the creation of the roadmap and the discussions we had, was the importance of, people talked about it as growing our own, as building that trained evaluation workforce within communities. And I think universities can play an important role in bringing training opportunities to individuals in tribal communities. Part of that is through the relationships, the conversations, and identifying people who have an interest in furthering their skills. and trying to engage those individuals with opportunities to learn and to understand more about evaluation practice. Universities can be creative in coming up with ways to do that, I think. And I mean, one example is the Tribal Early Childhood Research Center at the University of Colorado, in partnership with Johns Hopkins University and Michigan State University. We hosted a summer evaluation institute, sort of, this summer at Johns Hopkins. And it was a 1 week long intensive course in early childhood research in tribal communities. And we had 44 or 45 Native scholars from around the country who came, and many of them are program people working in early childhood. And we've talked about the importance of scientific rigor and cultural rigor, and I think there's no one better able to bridge that gap and to really bring that blending of culture and scientific rigor together than individuals from the communities who have been trained in the evaluation methods as well and can really bring the cultural and the scientific perspectives together.
I think it's really key as program directors that we really engage our staff in the evaluation process. And we serve in a really meaningful role as the liaison, the linking the evaluation piece and working with evaluators with our staff. And I think in our experiences with doing evaluations, tribal communities have always used storytelling. And I think our staff relate to that very well. And it's important that we can convey the information back to our communities, whether that's to our staff or to our tribal leadership, if that's being able to tell our story through storytelling. And I think it creates an opportunity for our tribal communities to really embrace that whole process, which really is more culturally relevant as we do this work. From my experience, I think it's important as we develop this new narrative which I find is key, is having a really good relationship with the evaluator. And in that relationship building, really we're able to articulate what the program needs are and what our program priorities are with the evaluator. And I think also is in that relationship is the evaluator can really help us better articulate what the questions that we're wanting to research. And I think the other really key piece is in that relationship is the program director and my staff can better articulate what the research is in terms of a relationship to understanding our community, our cultural values, and putting that all in context is really important to have a meaningful evaluation process within our communities.
You know, this is really the exciting part, because here is a roadmap that captures so much in just one image, and then there's so many layers to it that helps to explain different portions of it. So with this particular roadmap, we have clear guidelines, and whereas sometimes too often evaluation requirements are a mystery to program directors and staff, and they may not necessarily know why they're doing certain things or required to do certain things. So these clearer guidelines allow tribal evaluators to work with the community to generate this shared agenda, so people actually know from the very beginning why they're doing particular measures or why they're gathering particular kinds of information. And they also understand how it fits into the evaluation, how it fits into the purpose of the evaluation.
One of the big benefits to evaluation partners in the new roadmap, the new narrative, is really the explicit activity around engaging with tribal communities and working with sovereign nations, and better understanding how evaluation practice needs to proceed within that context. Understanding tribal protocols for evaluation, tribal protocols for research, and learning how to navigate that. I think another really important piece for evaluation partners is that sort of built into the roadmap, integrated within evaluation practice, are opportunities for mentoring and for building skills. And evaluation partners are kind of on both ends of that piece. There are opportunities for evaluation partners to provide mentoring and training and skill building for local community partners who maybe don't have as much exposure to evaluation practice. So they're helping to build that local capacity. I think there are also a lot of opportunities for tribal evaluation partners to obtain mentoring, both from university partners who can provide further training and guidance on evaluation practice and how to do practice in a way that's going to be most beneficial in the community. And I think it's also really important that evaluation partners have the opportunity to gain experience to be mentored by local community program staff about what are local practices, what is the local cultural context, what are the important questions to ask, how do you go about asking those questions, how do you go about sharing research findings back with the community. So there are a lot of opportunities for evaluation partners to be both teachers and learners within the context of the roadmap. Sometimes we overlook how much Native cultures have to teach us about ways of knowing and about how to learn and how to answer important questions. So I think there's a lot to be learned by those of us in universities from the cultural experts that we work with. And the roadmap, by encouraging those conversations, encouraging building relationships, encouraging that bi-directional learning between the cultural experts and the scientific experts, and bringing those together, I think is really important and really important to moving practice forward.
Another aspect of it is that there's greater transparency, which allows tribal evaluators to work with the community. And the greater transparency will allow not only the meaningfulness of what is going on currently with a particular program, but it also can alleviate some of the fears about the negative history of evaluation and the experiences of a particular community. So what transparency encourages is that communities can be involved in the evaluation process. It can allow them to better understand the results and how those results can be used, and that those results are there for a way of making improvements, that it's a way of saying, well, we got this outcome, so this is how we can either shift or we can have more focus on a particular aspect, and it really improves the services to children and their families. We can see that greater attention can be made to increase evaluation skills. This allows a better opportunity for professional development and for the local evaluators to improve their own work and their own expertise. They can better understand how to create evaluation and methods that are rigorous, but it really is built on a foundation that honors the cultural meaningfulness of what is there within the culture, and as well as addressing the local needs of those particular people in that particular community. And how wonderful that we can actually have tribal communities owning what it is that they are part of. So through this process, then we can also really talk about growing our own. So supporting the development of the workforce for child welfare evaluation within our communities. And I think that as we look at this roadmap, as we look at what is the essence of all of this, this concept is at the heart of creating a new narrative, is that we're helping this renewal of the talents and skills of our tribal community members. And that's really exciting. That's very exciting.